They partied way harder back then.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how they survived.
They also made some really good music. Welcome to Get to the Hook. I am your co-host, Charles Latibeaudiere.
And I'm your co-host, Eric Colley.
And this week we are going to be banging heads.
Yeah.
We're going to bang your head. We're getting into a little metal, a little 80s hair metal.
80s hair metal, glam metal, pop metal, whatever you want to call it.
Which has been a hot topic because of this. There's a new docuseries on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, it's called Nothing But a Good Time, The Uncensored Story of 80s Hair Metal.
It is a very ironic title.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these times were not good. Although, depends on who you talk to.
Did you notice in the opening titles of it when they have like neon sign that says Nothing But a Good Time and it shorts out and it says Not a Good Time? It blinks out all the letters
I didn't
and it
notice
just says
that.
Not a Good Time.
Yeah, well, because it wasn't in a lot of ways.
Well, it was like a lot of wild parties. It's fun while it's happening and then the hangover hits.
Yeah, and sometimes that hangover lasts for decades. As you see throughout this, when you hear from the artists, I will say that to the filmmakers, they got a lot of real, like, principal people involved. This was not, people on the side that they were talking to the actual artists about some of this stuff they went through. And it is, wow. Like, it's just, you can't imagine. I know it was a different time and we grew up in that era. And so you're used to hearing about it. But when you see it up against what is happening today, like, they partied way harder back then.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how they survived.
How they survived, how they weren't, more of them weren't thrown in prison because the things that they were doing and being celebrated for doing, pretty wild.
Because they were young, they had access to all the drugs and alcohol in the world, they had a lot of money, and so they could do whatever they wanted.
But more to the point here, they also made some really good music.
They did. Hair metal, it's hated by a lot of people. I love it. I know you love it.
I love it. I grew up in it.
The first song I want to play a little bit of, a little personal anecdote with you. I'm sure you do not remember this at all. Early days of us working together, a long time ago. Not that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah.
I mean, you were a little intimidating. You were one of the bosses, and I hadn't really spoken to you or anything. And I remember walking down the hallway one day, and you passed me, and you were singing "Smooth Up" by the Bullet Boys, and I just stopped and I go, "Were you just singing the Bullet Boys?" And you go, "Yep."
I do not remember that.
Of course you don't. It's totally, that's how my weird brain works, is I associate people with songs. So if you don't know this song, anybody listening, it wasn't a huge hit in 1989. It was a great song. This is "Smooth Up" by the Bullet Boys. I'm like, who's just walking around singing that song?
I'm racking my brain trying to remember why I would have been singing that song.
It's got in your head, man.
Because you're right, it wasn't a huge hit, but I remember that song very distinctly and loving the song. I don't know what happened that day in the office, why I would be randomly singing.
We are probably half the people on earth who remember that song.
Yeah, exactly.
But it did work the other way around, though, too. I remember not long after that, my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, I had a ringtone for her back when you had ringtones.
Right.
And you were walking by my edit bay, and she called me, and my ringtone for her was Jermaine Jackson's "Let's Get Serious." And I remember you stopped, and stepped back, and you go, "Did that just happen?" I was like, "Yep." I was like, "Okay, all right, we got some stuff in common there." The glam metal stuff, like, where does it start? Where do you say it starts? I mean, you could go back into the 60s when you got Led Zeppelin and, The Who and Black Sabbath.
Those artists seem to be, like, they were respected.
Yes.
Right? And I guess that's the difference that always felt like to me with the 80s hair metal bands, that they rocked hard, but they weren't really respected. It was more like they rocked hard and it was all about a party, and it wasn't so much about the music. But that's not to say they didn't make good music, but they weren't as respected as the people in the 60s and 70s.
But I think they were clearly influenced by those artists. Definitely. They took that heavy sound. Then you see that they had the early 70s British glam rock with T-Rex and Bowie and Slade, who's going to come up again in a little bit. A band that was never that big in America in the 70s, but influenced the right people. Also Kiss and the New York Dolls, the makeup, the theatrics, all these things came together. And you start seeing, in the 70s, as Van Halen is starting, which I don't think people consider Van Halen hair metal, but I think Eddie Van Halen created the sound every one of these guys was trying to imitate.
Right. And so I guess to answer your question, where does it start? It's either, in my mind, at least in my experience, being introduced to this music I have to shout out my good friend Carmine, who was a drummer when I was 13 years old, and he was the guy who like really introduced me to this music. It's either Van Halen or Motley Crue.
Right.
Or sort
Van
of
Halen's
both.
the beginning of that. But there's a band that came up alongside Van Halen in LA on the Sunset Strip in the 70s there before it really blew up into what it became in the 80s. And it's a band I don't think gets enough credit, Quiet Riot. And you're probably going to be like, Quiet Riot?
No, not at all.
Yeah. A lot of people dismiss them as like one-hit wonder.
I have the LP at home.
For Metal Health?
For Metal Health. Yeah, I guess that was before... Maybe I did start listening to that before Motley Crue. There was one kid on my block who was listening to Motley Crue, and we all thought that he was like a devil worshiper or something.
We're going to get to that too.
But yeah, you're right. Quiet Riot.
One of the biggest things about Quiet Riot, their original guitar player in the 70s was Randy Rhoads, who left Quiet Riot to join Ozzy Osbourne's band. Of course, died in a plane crash in 1982. Sad, because Randy Rhoads would have been, I mean, he's still respected, but he would have been Eddie Van Halen,
that guy,
in that level. If you don't know Randy Rhoads or you don't know his music, you know this. He created one of the most famous riffs in rock history. This is Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. And the reason Randy Rhoads, one of the reasons he left Quiet Riot, was because that band was insane before they were famous. They had put 2 albums out in Japan, and Kevin Dubrow, the lead singer, whose brother Terry Dubrow is the doctor from Botched.
Exactly.
Yeah, people don't know they were brothers. The bass player hated Kevin Dubrow so much, he got drunk one night and was like, I'm going to go kill him. And literally got in his car and drove to kill their lead singer. The bass player's like, I'm going to kill him.
You mean Randy Rhoads didn't want to be around that vibe? I don't understand.
Only reason it didn't happen, he got pulled over for a DUI and then sobered up in jail and was like, I don't want to kill anybody.
Oh, my God.
This is what was going on behind the scenes with all these bands. So there's that kind of nonsense going on. And when this stuff started blowing up in the early 80s, talking about Motley Crue again, parents were terrified because this was the era of the satanic panic. And these bands loved leaning into it. Motley Crue, more than just about anybody else. Their album, Shout at the Devil, has a pentagram on the cover.
Pentagram on the cover, yeah.
Listen to this song. This is Shout at the Devil. Shout, 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 shout at the devil! Shout, shout, shout. I remember my brother learning to play drums to that song in the basement. I would just hear that.
Say,
and I'm like, it's the devil. It's scary. Because I was like a little kid then. You had Wasp. Remember Wasp?
Yep,
Blackie Lawless, lead singer, had a saw blade on his codpiece. And it wasn't plastic. It wasn't fabric. It was an actual saw blade they had cut. He would throw raw meat into the audience. They had a part in the show where they would sacrifice a naked woman on stage. And they didn't actually kill her, but they did have a naked woman and fake beheading her.
In the documentary, they claim that it was not fake blood being thrown into the crowd, that it was sometimes actual blood.
Yeah, he would spit real blood, because Gene Simmons from Kiss spit blood, but it was red corn syrup.
Right.
No, Blackie Lawless got real blood. The bass player for Wasp, just to be over the top, and this is so painful, he took a cheese grater and put the front of it on the back of his bass guitar, and during the show would flip it around and show the audience and start shredding his knuckles on it. What was wrong with these people? This is why parents were terrified. You had Judas Priest, you had Dio's Holy Diver. It was all this satanic stuff. Yeah. Scared the crap out of parents. And kids loved it. But of course, radio's not going to go anywhere near that. So this metal scene was getting big. Things were happening, but it wasn't crossing over in a big way because it was just too scary. And that's when Quiet Riot, post Randy Rhoads, comes in here, and I think they are very significant. They leaned into the poppier glam side of it.
Right.
Their biggest hit was a cover. A lot of people don't know this was a cover. Slade, the British group, in 1973 had a song called Come On Feel the Noise. This is the original version of it.
I mean, a pretty happy song. Like you can see that being it's catchy tune, but man, when Quiet Riot put it in, it's just heavier and it goes to number 1.
Yeah, well, number 5. The song, the song goes number 5.
Right. The album was
the thing.
So, right.
Well, this is Quiet Riot. This was the first metal song to hit the top 10. This was their version of "Come On Feel the Noise" in '83. Yeah.
It's just that, like, the drum and the bass are so much heavier in that version.
Yeah, I love it so much. And as you said, so the album Metal Health went to number 1 for a week. And that is actually really, really significant because you got to look in the fall of 1983 when this goes to number 1.
Oh, there are some heavy hitters.
So Thriller had been dominating in and out of the number 1 spot. Mm-hmm. At this particular point in time, Thriller had been booted out by Synchronicity by the Police, which has Every Breath You Take on it.
Right.
Quiet Riot sneaks in for a week, and then Lionel Richie's Can't Slow Down, the Grammy Album of the Year award winner, gets to number 1. So
how's that how's that for a wide variety of music, man?
Yeah.
The mid 80s, man,
it was firing. Thing. But you've got peak commercial Michael Jackson, the Police, Lionel Richie, and this doofus metal band from the Sunset Strip, and I say doofus with love.
Yeah.
Sneaks in a week at number 1. And it seemed like, okay, this is the arrival.
That song was so huge, man.
So big that when they did their next album the next year, Condition Critical, the first single, Mama We're All Crazy Now, was also a Slade cover. They were like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Quiet Riot, sadly for them, could not sustain that. They fell apart, partly because Kevin DuBrow talked a lot in interviews, and he just trash-talked every other band, said everybody ripped them off, compared Quiet Riot to the Beatles, just pissed people off left and right, including his own band, who fired him in 1987. Right. Like, you're ruining our career. Shut up. I mean, imagine if he had Twitter.
Yeah.
Woohoo, God. So Quiet Riot broke the door open for a lot of people. And also in '83, we got to acknowledge Def Leppard.
Right.
The Pyromania album, Photograph. Mm-hmm. Although I think Def Leppard wasn't really seen as hair metal the same way Quiet Riot was.
Yeah, I guess they weren't. But also, and I felt like there was a distinction in this documentary also that they were focusing primarily on the Sunset Strip, the LA hair metal bands, which Def Leppard is not, but
it did give us Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Poison, Guns N' Roses. A lot of big bands came from that, and those were the more over-the-top, wild party bands.
Right.
Def Leppard never really came across that way.
Yeah, I'm sure they did, but they don't have the reputation.
I'm not saying they didn't party, but they
don't have the rep. Yeah,
right. They weren't, Motley Crue running around biting people, which is one of the things I learned in this documentary. Quick funny story about that. I meant to tell you this. Yeah, so Motley Crue, in this documentary, they tell a story about how they were on tour with AC/DC and Van Halen, and they decided to go up and start biting Eddie Van Halen on the shoulders, like to draw blood.
Right.
Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx.
It was sort of like, we're with you, you're with us, and in order to show this, we're going to bite you.
And so they get in a fist fight. Tommy Lee and David Lee Roth were doing like karate or something on a table.
Right.
AC/DC gets involved, and AC/DC and Van Halen are like, these guys are going off the tour because they were the opening act, and like, we're done with them. The problem for them was, by that point, Motley Crue was already too big.
Right.
This was after Shout the Devil. So they couldn't kick them off. So I found out today, one of the compromises the promoter came up with was, as soon as Motley Crue does their opening set, they will go to their trailer, and a crane will lift the trailer off the ground so they can't get out.
They can't get
Right. So they were not allowed to interact with the other bands at all.
So you want me to believe that so when Motley Crue got done, they were sitting in a suspended trailer?
This is a story from Dr. D, their manager, who also did Kiss and Bon Jovi, a legend in the industry. They suspended them off the ground so they couldn't go anywhere. Like, they were literally like rats in a cage. Like, look, you crazy animals.
Yeah, keep them in the cage, and sure, give them all the booze and drugs they need while they're in there.
Yeah.
But
it's amazing they never fell out. I don't know if or how much that happened, but that was the plan. It was like, we're just going to literally lift them off the ground and keep
even if it didn't happen, the fact that they had to put it in writing that that's what they will do.
That was definitely the plan.
How terrified everybody else on the tour was. Like, we cannot be around these guys.
But they were selling a lot of records at that time. So '84, Quiet Riot kind of is fading away at that point. But you still see all these other bands who benefited from Quiet Riot's success. And there's a lot of classic songs that year. Scorpions, Rock You Like a Hurricane. Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It. Rats, Round and Round, which I love that song. But none of those songs made the top 10. None of those albums went
Round and Round didn't make top 10?
Only number 12, which is a real shame. So it's still big, but it hasn't conquered the entire music universe yet. One of the other bands who had a minor top 40 hit in 1984 did eventually conquer the world. The song Runaway got to number 39 in 1984, barely scratched the top 40, for a band from New Jersey called Bon Jovi. And Bon Jovi had this epiphany while working on their next album. What if we also get songs that appeal to women? Soften the image just enough, because these guys, like I said, there was all the satanic stuff and people were scared.
Right.
The misogyny, Wasp sacrificing women on stage. Bon Jovi's like, what if we, still make songs for guys, still rock, but make songs women can relate to.
Right. Smart formula.
Man, it was a smart formula. 1986, Slippery When Wet comes out. I mean, the title is still, yes. Very sexual, guy-driven stuff. First song, You Give Love a Bad Name, about this woman that's awful, and goes to number one. It's the first of these metal songs to ever hit number one.
Wow.
Then the second single is the one that
oh boy,
guys can like it. You can pump your fist to it, but it's an undeniable song. This, of course, is Living on a Prayer.
I'm just cringing a little bit at that. And it's not, I don't have any issue with Bon Jovi. I don't hate Bon Jovi.
I'm still tired of that song from 1987.
But I do recall when they were blowing up that it was a thing that like chicks liked Bon Jovi.
Yeah, they were a chick.
Guys liked Motley Crue. Or
right.
Guys liked, Guns N' Roses. There was definitely a vibe around them.
But Motley Crue
that was unwarranted. That was just,
No, it was a little warranted.
Because they were certainly, like you said, playing to a female audience, and I think the guys knew that. Now, the weird part was when Bon Jovi would be on tour, guys would always be like, I don't want to go see Bon Jovi. But you would go because you knew that there were lots of women there.
Right.
And so you wanted to go, but you had to have some excuse why you were going, oh, well, yeah, my buddy's girl wants to go, so we're all just going to go.
Well, they always say when you're DJing, that's the trick. Play a song that girls like, because girls will come and dance just by themselves.
Right.
And then the guys will show up. If you play music for guys, the guys are not going to go dance because there's no girls, and the girls won't go because they don't like it. Yeah, so Bon Jovi, and they also toned down the image. It wasn't the super bright spandex and all the makeup and all that. Ripped jeans and cowboy boots. They had the perfect hair.
Hair.
Oh, John Bon Jovi's hair was a beautiful thing. But it was wise of them to do this because Slippery When Wet, by the end of 1987, had sold 8 million copies. To date, it's at 15 million times platinum.
Wow.
Even still, Living on a Prayer, 1.7 billion streams for that song on Spotify. You Give Love a Bad Name, 1.1 billion.
All from people singing karaoke.
Probably, well. But it was such a huge moment, not just for Bon Jovi, who were one of the few of these bands to endure into the 90s and beyond. They can still tour. They're still Bon Jovi. But they opened it up for everybody because the record labels saw, oh, there's a lot of money in this now. We can get hit songs. We can get on MTV. We can sell millions and millions of records. And it helped with Bon Jovi that there were other big records ready to go right at that time. Def Leppard came back with Hysteria.
Which was enormous.
Yeah, Pour Some Sugar on Me, the stripper song. Also the stripper song, Girls, Girls, Girls by Motley Crue, 87. Then Guns N' Roses dropped Appetite for Destruction. And again, I would not say Guns N' Roses was a band for girls in the same way that Bon Jovi was, but girls loved Axl Rose and they loved Sweet Child of Mine, which has over 2 billion streams. I mean, this was the apex of this.
Oh, yeah. And so it's great. So I get the appeal that at that point, even a band like Guns N' Roses, which you wouldn't think of as being appealing to female fans, it does. My question in all this, where does, and I can't remember, where does Poison come in?
We're Poison up to Poison. Poison first hit with Talk Dirty to Me in 1986. I was saving Poison to talk about because when you look at now the ones that are most remembered who still get a lot of streams are Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Def Leppard. But the success of those guys helped so many other bands just come in and start. This is when it started dominating. Everything on the radio was one of these. Whitesnake, Here I Go Again. Cinderella, White Lion. I loved White Lion. Wait, I love that song. You don't like it. When the Children Cry, I didn't love so much, but I liked Wait. Kix, Vixen, the all-female metal group.
Yes, I remember
Europe,
that.
The Final Countdown. Everybody knows that. These guys are all huge. Poison also in that mix. They're having a bunch of hits. They were the last of that Sunset Strip act.
Right.
That, they had all the super makeup. You look at that album cover and they look like the Bangles. They are 4 beautiful women.
I always felt like they were doing that on purpose, that they almost wanted to look like the Bangles.
They overdid the makeup a bit. But after Bon Jovi, then you see their next album, they stripped all that back, got a little stubble, stopped wearing the makeup, and then Poison did not invent the power ballad at all. It had already existed, the big power chords and all that. This was the song you used. The bands who weren't designed to appeal to women could still do it with the power ballad.
The power ballad, right.
And nobody did it better, and nobody had a bigger power ballad hit than Poison. With this song, Every Rose Has Its Thorn.
Every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn.
I realized we could do a whole episode just on power ballads.
Oh, yeah. And the formula, I love this.
It was a thing.
That would be the radio hit. And they acknowledged this in that documentary, and I thought it was funny because when I first, being a nerdy chart watcher, when I first realized this trend, it was hilarious. All these bands, you come out with a hard rocking song first to prove you can rock and get the guys.
Right.
Maybe it'd make the top 40, maybe. Then you do the power ballad, and that's your top 10
number one. Goes
so
all the
you
way
had
to the top.
Slaughter came out with Up All Night, and the rocked, and then Fly to the Angels and the beginning of the Fly to the Angels
I still
video.
love I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
that
still
song's
love
beautiful.
Fly to the Angels.
Mark Slaughter had an incredible voice. But the beginning of that song is a group of girls in a record store singing Up All Night because it was girls who thought Mark Slaughter was hot. Because that was another thing, too, that John Bon Jovi did is he's objectively a very handsome man.
Right. So you got to have the
You got to get the dreamboat heartthrob. And, then also the other bands, Firehouse, do you remember them in the early 90s? Came out with Don't Treat Me Bad and then hit with...
what was the Firehouse hit?
not Love of a Lifetime. Yeah, Love of a Lifetime.
Yes.
Warrant came out with Down Boys and then hit with Heaven was their biggest hit. You come out with the hard song, then you do the ballad. The video would be black and white, maybe a little backstage footage, maybe somebody passed out from partying too hard.
Yes, that's the power ballad video.
Yeah.
But then the rocker video is some performance clips with really hot chicks.
And that is what I think. I hate to assign blame to this, and I feel bad for this band because they got so much hate. We just talked about Warrant. Mm-hmm. I think the low point. I think the tipping point when you realized this is going to end, long before grunge hit, was the fall of 1990. It was getting a little too predictable at this point. The bands were getting a little too generic. They all kind of looked the same. They all kind of sounded the same. All the songs are about partying and chicks, and then about how you love your girl, because that's the ballad. It was such a formula. And then when Warrant dropped the Cherry Pie video, it was like a parody. It was like an In Living Color sketch making fun of hair metal.
Yes.
This is a little bit of Cherry Pie.
She's my cherry pie, cool drinking water, such a sweet surprise. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie.
They almost don't seem like they're taking it seriously. It's
they were
like
in on the joke.
When you watch the video, it looks like they know that this is a joke.
But remember the part where
it was
all...
a hit.
Bobby Brown was the name of the model, not Bobby Brown from New Edition. She was a model. She's like in cutoffs, and they're all dressed up as firemen, hosing her down. Like they're all standing there holding this big fire hose and hitting her in the face, and she's just like, no! And then they drop
and
a slice of cherry pie into her crotch.
Right.
It was just so over the top.
The cherries in her mouth and the whole thing.
It just was like, what is this?
Yeah. And
then right after that, and this documentary acknowledges this, Beavis and Butthead premieres on MTV in the early 90s. And one of the most damning things for hair metal was that Beavis and Butthead's shirts were Metallica and AC/DC. Their dorky friend Stuart next door wore a Winger t-shirt. Winger,
I did not remember that.
Winger was one of those last wave, third wave hair metal bands who were very successful. Kip Winger's a very handsome guy with nice big white teeth.
Stuck with the formula.
Yep. And they came out with 17, which was a little creepy. Definitely wouldn't fly today. I'm surprised it even flew in 1989. Then they do Headed for a Heartbreak. They get the ballads. Mm-hmm. After the Winger shirt appeared on Beavis and Butthead as the avatar of uncoolness. In this documentary, the members of Winger say, we were playing for tens of thousands of people a night, and literally the next week after that episode, we played for 1,500 people. Like, we were so uncool so quickly.
Done in by Beavis and Butthead.
Right. I think,
Which points to Beavis and Butthead's popularity. They never had a number one hit, but they were...
Yeah. But that was the thing. It had gotten so over the top and so ridiculous. Yeah. Critics hated it. Fans were getting a little burnout. And they had lost the original audience, guys who just loved this like ultra, machismo kind of rock.
Yeah.
It was all power ballads for girls at this point. And those guys were like, ugh. And they were everyone was tired of the lyrics about cherry pie and partying and all that. And then
they wanted a little more depth.
This new music came in that had some depth. Yeah. And it had a lot of rock energy, but it wasn't cartoonish like the early metal bands. Yeah. It wasn't satanic. of course, it was this song hit MTV and everything was over. Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Here's the grunge. Yeah, you're right. There was a respectability that came in with grunge for the actual artistry that was lacking from the hair metal scene. And and that was,
and people just found this new thing and just loved it, and it killed the hair metal overnight. The biggest bands, like I said, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Guns N' Roses, they survived. They were okay. Everybody else gone.
Yep.
They couldn't play a county fair the next
end of an era, and I'm sure that there are hotel managers everywhere that were celebrating the end of the because the number of hotel rooms that were destroyed in the 80s.
Oh, geez. Number of TVs thrown through windows. And Motley Crue actually had to call their manager every day after a hotel stay and give him a list of things they broke so he could just pay for it.
What are we going to need to replace today, guys?
Yeah. Doc McGee said that Nikki Sixx would call him and be like, 2 TVs, a lamp, and whatever this thing is. Didn't even know what it was.
They'd have a clipboard during their party.
Yeah.
You're like, check that off. Yep, I need one of those.
They'd have to sober up the next day and be like, what did I break? Because they didn't even know. And he was like, oh, you guys. Which, by the way, talking about like the legacy of these bands, they still have never been critically respected.
Yeah.
And which is too bad because a lot of them, just as musicians, you had to be really talented.
Some of them were really great musicians, if not virtuoso at their particular instrument, but they didn't get the respect for it.
Because there were so many of these bands.
But in a way, that's what they sold out for that, right? They knew that was the deal. We're gonna play to huge stadiums, but it's not gonna be because I'm the greatest drummer, I'm the greatest guitarist.
Yeah. And I guess they thought that was gonna last forever. I think people have come around a bit. We've seen in the last few years in the Rock Hall of Fame, Bon Jovi finally got inducted.
Yep.
Def Leppard got inducted. Motley Crue is still not in the Rock Hall of Fame, and I do not understand that because who is more rock and roll than Motley Crue? And I know the Rock Hall of Fame is more than just rock and roll, but they have the legacy, they have endured.
And
they've got the songs.
Yeah.
Dr. Feelgood, come on.
They have actual
hits
crap on
too.
Motley Crue. Like we said early on with Motley Crue, they weren't getting the radio play, but they more than made up for that.
Well, I would say it wasn't as big as Every Rose Has Its Thorn in the moment, but the template for the power ballad, Motley Crue did create that with Home Sweet Home in '85. That was
played it on the bus on our football coming home from football road trips. Yeah,
I remember it wasn't TRL, it was Dial MTV then, the daily call-in show. They told people you couldn't vote for it anymore because it had been #1 so long.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, no, okay, we have to play something else now. Pick something that's not Home Sweet Home.
Wow.
So, a lot of the hair bands, some of them have died. Kevin Dubrow from Quiet Riot died. Jenny Lane from Warren is dead. It's sad. Some of the guys are gone. But a lot are still around, and they still tour.
Yeah, some of them are still touring.
A lot of hair pieces now.
and somewhat successfully.
Some of them still love it. Remember Steel Panther in L.A. on the Sunset Strip?
Yes.
Became basically a tribute band to this and had a really solid career playing because people love to go hear this stuff because it's fun. Even if you weren't around for it when it happened.
And especially if you can see it, like if you're here in LA, if you can see it on the Sunset Strip, there's still a vibe about seeing a band, any band, on the Sunset Strip.
Right.
It just it's just very cool.
Yeah.
To go into those places, to go into the Whiskey, to go into the Roxy.
Yeah, because you have the '60s bands like the Doors and all these bands that played there. And then you've got all those 80s bands who not only played there, started there. Yeah. Even ones like, Poison came from Pennsylvania, but they moved to LA and came up on the Sunset Strip. Yeah. So a lot of history there. I feel there should be some justice for the hair band. I get they weren't making art necessarily.
They made art but it wasn't just about the music. Part of it was the presentation of it.
Of course.
So that's all art.
And remember, this happened to be blowing up in the early 80s at the same time MTV premiered.
Yeah.
So visuals became more important than they ever had been up to that point. You couldn't just play your music. You had to have a visual presentation too. Yeah. And they came up with a visual presentation. Tawny Katane doing backflips on the hood of Coverdale's car.
Yeah, they did the visuals big time. It's all burned into our brains if you're of a certain age.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. Listen, I think there will be justice. I think Motley Crue obviously will get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame probably within the next few years. It'll happen. You just got to be around long enough, and eventually everybody gives you your flowers.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's before you pass away.
Yeah, I hope it's not the flowers on your grave.
Right.
While you're still alive. What is it? What's the saying? Give your flowers while you're alive to smell it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, as we sign off here, I still want to go back to this fact that you dropped about when Quiet Riot, when their album went to #1. That's why if you hear Gen X saying that our music was better and our radio play was better, it's because think of those artists that you had in that span of a month hit #1. Michael Jackson, The Police, Quiet Riot, Lionel Richie.
Right.
You don't have that kind of range these days.
Oh, you sound like such an old man.
That's right.
Now.
Get off.
You can go
get
cherry
off my
pick
lawn too.
anytime you want.
That is going to do it for us. We will see you next week when we get back to the hook.